Hello, welcome to Threads 2023. I'm here with Mr. Humphrey, a professor from the University of Saskatchewan, who's currently researching cures to help cancer patients all over Canada. Now, Mr. Humphrey, may I ask you, is there any part of your work that you find difficult as a Black man living in Canada who immigrated from Cameroon?
Yeah, there's always some difficulties when you're Black. And that's particularly true with me as well, because when I moved to the University of Saskatchewan and doing what I do, when you go somewhere and tell people what you do, people kind of doubt if you can do it. So I work very closely with medical oncologists and radiation oncologists just to be able to do what I do, which is, and to be more specific, that aspect of my work is talking to medical oncologists and radiation oncologists to ask them to help me recruit patients to move that will allow me to test some of these new compounds that I make. And so when you go there and you talk to them, hey, this is what I do. I mean, it doesn't even matter if they think you're a professor, but they look at you and say, I don't think you can do this. And that has been said in my face quite a few times. So I think that makes it a little bit challenging, and so I've always had to put in an extra mile to be able to explain to these people that I have the knowledge, experience, expertise to do what I do, and so when they see me meeting with Health Canada on a frequent basis and inviting them to some of my meetings with Health Canada and so on, then they tend to almost believe that, hey, this guy can do this. And it's fine, because some of these physicians will say, okay, you may go inject, you may give us a compound, a drug that might end up killing our cancer patient, and so what about that risk? But over time, when they see you doing what you're doing very well, we make some of these compounds, give them to the physicians to administer in patients, and no one ever has come up with an adverse effect, so they start to believe what you say you can do, right? So, but from the get-go, there's always that strange feeling, and people tell me in my face, I don't think you can do what you said you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you find it like, as young Black kids who are currently interested in fields of STEM and medicine, we find that there's a lot of challenges when dealing with people judging you and their prejudices on what you can or cannot do. So do you find you have to work harder to prove yourself in the field that you're working in?
Yes, and I think this is particularly true with us Black kids or Blacks. But that's not to discourage anyone, right? Mm-hmm. I always say if the pass grade is a 50, as a Black kid, you should have a 51, or you should have something slightly better. But that also just gets you to the door, right? That gets you to the door, and then you're able to kind of prove your skills. The moment you work hard, like in any case, in any field, if you really want to set yourself as aside or apart from the others, you need to have something very unique, especially as a Black person. Mm-hmm. Again, that's not to discourage you, but once that gets you to the door, I think you need to do even more to get up the ladder, right? Because getting you to the door doesn't mean you're going to be promoted as quickly as the others, but again, it's doable. The skills that get you to the door, the skills that would get you into a professional program like med school, as the same skills and hard work that will get you through. Unfortunately, we need to work a little bit harder to get to that door, but it's all doable.
Mm-hmm. So my younger sister, Udemgba, is currently in elementary school. What advice would you have for her as a college professor for someone who's interested in going to a field of STEM or medicine or science? How would she combat the prejudices, and how would she prove herself? What was your journey like when you were starting out, and what would you do differently if you were in her position?
The first thing I would tell you is pretend as if those prejudices don't exist. Don't think about them, right? Just don't bother about them. You go focus on your work, on your grades. At your level, it's grades. I mean, when it comes to a certain level, there's a lot of additional package you need to have to excel. But just go focus on your grades. Don't forget about any other thing, and that alone is gonna get you into a very decent STEM program, right? So when you start thinking a lot about, oh, I am a black person, it just kind of dampens you. It sucks the air out of you. And when I go and I go to work these days, when I do something, I really don't have it even in my near side mirror that I am a black person. I just know I have to work hard to be the best at what I do.
Speaking of like the black population and how it's hard for us to really deal with the healthcare system and how it relates to some problems that we might have in the future, is it difficult for you to coincide your Cameroonian identity with your Canadian identity, speaking to how you're in a field that might not be populated by a lot of Black Canadians, but you're unique of your culture, so you need to kind of combine the two and live in harmony with both of them? Is it difficult for you to do that?
Yes, and and at times it's a yes and no, right? So it's you know, I come from a slightly different culture, and well, the good thing is I have had to adapt to the Canadian culture, right? On so many aspects, just to be able to do things the way it's supposed to be done here. It's really slightly different, especially coming from a very corrupt country like Cameroon with all sorts of issues, right?
Et ton identité française aussi, tu as besoin, comme avec l'identité québécoise, êtes-vous accepté par les Québécois et les Français ici au Canada?
No, I think the Quebec identity is really very different from the Cameroonian French identity, for which I have a little bit of that because my wife is French speaking, so I kind of got a little bit of the French makeup genes in the house. But I think the Quebec way of life, and I lived in Montreal for a little bit, so the Quebec culture is slightly different. You know, there's a very stark difference between I think the cultural makeup of Quebec and the cultural makeup of the typical Parisian or the French, right? So I wouldn't identify more with Quebec.
Okay, well, it's nice to know that as a French second language speaking individual, I understand that there's a lot of cultural difference, but I just think it's very interesting how African French cultural identity is explored here in Canada.
Yes, I think now there's a lot of push and truly and respectfully so to have more of that French identity in Canada. I mean, I come from a country where it's kind of like the opposite of what we have in Canada, where the English speaking we are just a tiny minority, and here also the French speaking are a tiny minority, right? And so I really think that French culture, I like the fact that there's a lot of French-speaking programs all over the country, and you are able to speak French very well without living in Quebec, because I think it's a very unique identity. So it's gonna take you to places you won't believe. Just that extra capability to speak the French language very well, I think.
Well, thank you, Mr. Humphreys, for this conversation. It was very insightful. And we thank you for your time and your patience while watching our video.